There are hushed murmurs. A lot more intimate loneliness. You can believe that after some time you adapt to it. Is the key to adjusting just to forgetting about it? Does it involve waiting, though? Now more than ever I was doubting this. At the age of 61 I died. I had devoted the most of my life to making other people happy. Years ago my husband passed away. But the true isolation didn't begin till he departed. It is possible to have feelings of abandonment even while you are physically present. I'd spent a considerable amount of time here alone. My heart and the doors had both shut. But sometimes the most inconvenient times are the ones that doors open. That day was no different from any other. I had that impression, however. Was that night truly a mistake? I wonder now that I'm looking back. Alternately, was it the revelation of some long-suppressed truth about myself? I was enjoying a sunset from the porch when my phone started ringing. There was a blending of the light and dark fight. The internal conflict is similar. I noticed my grandchild Caleb's name when I glanced at the screen. Quite peculiar. We had never been very close, but I loved him nevertheless. He was a young man off on his own. Not often did he call. I responded. His speech was hurried. However, an additional factor emerged. An anxious feeling. Dear Grandma, we are close by. It was a total bust. I'm in D'Angelo's camp. Is it possible for us to drop by? I was still for an instant. The angel. For some reason, the sound of that name really stuck with me. The second I heard it, though, an old numb sensation froze me. For a brief while I considered. In that little instant a change occurred. Without a doubt, Caleb. Sure, I can show you. My natural reaction upon hanging up was to put my palm on my chest. In the depths of my being, the rapid heart rate puzzled me. It wasn't the first time I'd seen D'Angelo, Caleb's pal. Sturdy, towering, hard to miss. Dynamic with a black complexion. And someone whose aura was impossible to ignore. He had never been rude. Always be courteous. However, on sometimes such gazes, something was within them. Something that eludes me. Quite a change from the last time I saw a man like that. Now those very same eyes were going to be peering into my home. At the door, Caleb was being his typical carefree, enthusiastic self. However, D'Angelo? Nothing moved him. When he spoke, it was with his eyes. That was his style. How are you doing, Laura? His question came in a low voice that swept over me. I'm fine, I murmured. However, there was an unusual quiver to my voice. D'Angelo may or may not have noticed. His subtle expression assured me he didn't miss a thing. Inside they went. While Caleb was engaged in conversation, I couldn't take my eyes off the man before me. Beyond becoming Caleb's friend, D'Angelo felt something more. There seemed to be more to him. Was he aware of it? I had my doubts. One thing, nevertheless, was assured. He hadn't made the journey here only due to an unreliable vehicle. What that meant was still unclear to me. However, I realized there was no going back once I discovered it. As the hours passed that night, the house fell into a profound stillness. I lay in bed, attempting to slumber. Aside from my heart, my head was equally fidgety. Here was D'Angelo. A forbidden sensation was developing inside of me, and I was beginning to lose control of it. A long-forgotten secret. Left behind. Feeling was gone. Restarted to breathe anew amidst the rubble. I removed the cover from my body. I was sweltering even though the air was chilly. Maybe it's due to being alone. Perhaps through their peepers. Or perhaps it's simply the result of spending so long in the shadows. Rising silently, I made my way to the kitchen. I could really use a sip of water. I convinced myself of that anyway. However, I caught sight of him the moment I entered the kitchen. To show your support, subscribe to my channel and enable notifications if you're new to hearing confessions like this. In order to proceed, have faith in me. You will be sad when this tale concludes. He was resting his weight on the counter, D'Angelo. A gray t-shirt and knee-length pajama shorts were his only garments. His shirt was creaking under the weight of his arms. In the low light, his skin seemed to be practically glowing. However, I chose not to. He also failed to do so. With a deep and soft voice, he inquired about being unable to sleep. Perhaps I'm not accustomed to. I mentioned having guests over. Even the normalcy of my voice was a mystery to me. D'Angelo never took his gaze off of me as he grinned slightly. Laura, it's risky to become accustomed to being alone too much. With a firmer grasp, I held my glass. Did I have trembling hands? I know, I whispered. No sound. However, there were a lot of whispers. Silence engulfed him. I also didn't. What about my physical self? I didn't even notice that I was leaning toward him. Seemed as though there was more tension between us now. The force of gravity seemed to be drawing us together. With his gaze fixed on mine, D'Angelo set his glass on the counter and ran his fingers along its edge. My name is Laura. His voice carried a cautionary note. A pause. Nevertheless, he persisted. Even I advanced a step further as I met his gaze. We were virtually shoulder to shoulder. His aroma wafted over me. His body was hot. My pulse was racing at an alarming rate. D'Angelo raised his hand a small distance. However, I was still taken aback by that. Could he possibly get closer? Would he reach out and touch me? There would be no going back if he did this. My eyes were shut. I was engulfed in a tempest. Upstairs, meanwhile, a cracking sound suddenly emerged. I recoiled like if someone had hit me. Without hesitation, D'Angelo stood up, his gaze suddenly shifting upward. Uncle Caleb. Under his breath, he murmured. We both. Why were we even here? We locked gazes. There had been an electric hush only a moment ago, but now it was shattered. I felt compelled to speak up. However, I chose not to. I merely retreated to my room after turning around. I sat awake in bed, still entangled in my own bewilderment, when daylight came. I preferred to avoid dwelling on yesterday night. My thoughts still couldn't let go of that scene. Quietness filled the home. Upon entering Caleb's room, I noticed that his bed remained undisturbed. He has vanished. A choice was made in the recesses of my soul, far away from where I am now. My toes began to wiggle all by themselves. I had a crystal clear plan for my journey. I forcefully opened the door to D'Angelo's bedroom. D'Angelo blinked awake as light streamed into the room. He was still just partially awake, with his face buried in the pillow. His eyes widened at my sight, though. It was more subdued than I had anticipated. D'Angelo, Caleb has departed. At that very moment he opened his eyes wide. At that same moment I realized there was no turning back. There was a brief period of quiet in the room. After rubbing his eyes, D'Angelo went to get his phone off the nightstand. As he opened a message, he whispered something to Caleb. His gaze darted over the screen before returning to me. So what exactly does it offer shoppers? My heart was racing as I inquired. With an arched eyebrow, D'Angelo shifted the phone to face me. Dropped by a friend's place. He promised to return later that day. I preferred to be undisturbed. I yanked my eyes out of the screen and met his. At that very second, our thoughts were converging. For the moment, we were the only ones in the house. With his gaze fixed on me, D'Angelo placed his phone down again. Gradually, he rose from his bed and stared directly at me. You know, Laura, he whispered. I've taken note of you previously, but being here in this state makes it even more difficult to conceal my emotions. I fixed my gaze on his countenance. His shameless, naked stare betrayed his sincerity. Would you like to express your emotions to me? My voice was noticeably lower than I had anticipated when I inquired. With his jaw clenched and his gaze fixed downward, D'Angelo cocked his head ever so slightly. Then he locked eyes with me once again. The attraction I feel toward you is indescribable. He claimed it was regardless of our age gap. Unexpectedly, something changed inside of me. The thing I was looking for, though, was finally here. You should feel improper since you are younger than me. As I completed the phrase, my voice suddenly became quiet. Even still, it has an impact on me. D'Angelo remained unfazed and unblinking. Something sizzled in his gaze. Something I could sense but not put my finger on. I confess that I observed you fix the car yesterday when you arrived. Your clenched muscles and the oil on your hands were visible to me. Despite my reluctance, I forced myself to take a deep breath. The emotions it evoked were impossible to ignore. A tiny grin tugged at D'Angelo's lips as he leaned in ever so slightly. During supper and subsequently while preparing the meal, I was surprised by how quickly my body responded. He moved to the edge of the bed, put his hands on his knees, and glanced at me with a small tilt of his head. Speaking in a lower voice, he admitted to Laura that he had also been thinking about last night. Also, I sensed a change when I spotted you in the kitchen. regardless of how brief it may be. I sensed that my perception of you had to shift beyond that of Caleb's grandmother. I felt a shudder go through my body. I had never looked at him like that before. And his expression was identical to mine. Not to protect myself but to gather my might, I crossed my arms in front of me. "So, D'Angelo, what's next?" I inquired. Did I just make a trembling sound? D'Angelo slowly smiled at me and then raised his hand to touch my wrist with his fingertips. What he said was this: "I think we can all see where this is heading." Yes, we did. And I gasped for air. I was determined not to break away this time. A shiver ran down my spine, but it was excitement rather than fear. I felt an exhilaration that I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. My gaze was fixed on D'Angelo's. At that very moment, I had a feeling that he could sense my inner turmoil. Even he could feel it, so he was aware. My fingers delicately extended toward the robe belt. I could feel his heavy stare falling on me as my fingers eased the delicate silk. A knot was untied. As soon as the front of my robe separated ever so slightly, it fell from my shoulders and gathered at the foot of the bed. I drew a long breath and, without hesitation, climbed onto the bed next to him. He was warm all over and he breathed deeply. I finally got a good whiff of his aroma. Fresh, youthful, enticing. Even though my hands were on the sheets, I felt a strong draw toward him and had no plans to resist. With a gentle lift, D'Angelo touched my face with his fingertips. With a deep, seductive voice, he whispered to Laura. My eyes were shut. Deep, slow, and irresistible, his voice encircled me like a tune. Upon reopening them, I noticed that his face had drawn nearer to mine. Our lips finally came together, experimenting slowly at first. However, in an instant, our suppressed emotions were head over that kiss. With a gentle touch, D'Angelo brought me close, drawing me close to him. No, I gave in. I don't see why. I felt wanted for the very first time. I yearned for him. As he rose gently, D'Angelo's warm body pressed closer to mine. He stared directly at me. He was no longer attempting to conceal anything from this dark and profound place. His fingers moved lower and slower as his palms softly rested on my waist. My heart raced. As if on autopilot, I extended my arms for further. It was unnecessary for me to even move. Already, D'Angelo desired me. Leaning in closer, he encircled me like a shadow and stared at my face the whole time. He seemed to be confessing something without saying a word, and it showed in his eyes. I was prepared to. Everything was okay with me. Something stirred within me as I saw D'Angelo gradually raise his hand. For a brief second, the tremendous heat made me forget about my feelings of isolation. Without delay, I responded, "Dude, you're just stunning." My own being was paralyzed with fear. In the background, I could make out D'Angelo's labored voice. When I opened them, he was gushing over my beauty and told me I was gorgeous. I did nothing more than observe as the first rays of morning light fell on his shoulders. My hands slid down from his shoulders as I raised them. After that, I put them on his back and applied light pressure. I muttered, "D'Angelo, I knew you were the right choice from the very beginning," as my nails bit into his flesh beneath his consciousness. With a deep, passionate voice, D'Angelo drew in close, his breath caressing the space between my neck and ear. As he spoke, his movements became increasingly forceful, promising that he would never again let you feel lonely or forgotten. I just couldn't help myself. With a firm grasp, I extended my hand for the sheets. I was quaking with fear. My legs stiffened, as if propelled by an immense power. I don't understand. Before this, I had never felt anything like it. It was mind-boggling. I never imagined I would experience this myself, even if I had heard of it. I think D'Angelo got it. His eyes landed on me. According to him, you acted as if this was something your body had never experienced before. Yes, D'Angelo, it was truly my first time. I confessed it with all the candor, surprise, and enthusiasm that the situation warranted. He probably let himself go the second he heard that since he was so overwhelmed. He passed out next to me at that point. The rhythm of our breathing remained irregular as we lay side by side. In response to the sudden sideways movement of my head, my chest pounded frantically. A small grin spread across D'Angelo's lips as he gazed up at the ceiling. He seemed to be caressing my flesh as he delicately traced his fingertips over my arm. His turn to break the hushed calm came just a little while later. As he raised his head a little, he retrieved his phone to see what time it was. Then he cocked an eyebrow at me, a mischievous twinkle in his gaze. The man answered with a mischievous smile that it's just 12. I clenched my jaw and attempted to stifle the excitement building up inside of me. Oh, I was sorely disappointed. I inquired more, knowing full well the direction he was taking this. D'Angelo frowned and cocked his head ever so slightly. He murmured something about how far away it was until nightfall. Even I couldn't help but smile. He had me completely captivated. D'Angelo, what are you actually planning? I inquired. He leaned slightly on his shoulder, extended his hand, and delicately cupped my chin in his fingers as I cocked my head to face him. Are you in agreement? His voice was low and raspy as he inquired. Even if it's a bit worn out, it's still really inviting. I couldn't help but chuckle out loud. He felt a little push from me as I put my palm on his chest. He, however, was not the kind to let that deter him. He merely drew nearer. After then, an idea sneaked into my head. D'Angelo, what comes next? I inquired. The internal conflict was as obvious as day, even if my voice was lower than I had anticipated. He became gravely serious at that same moment. Carefully examining me, he ran his fingers through my hair as he gently caressed my cheek. Admittedly, I am unsure. However, my sole certainty is that I would prefer not to dwell on the subject. I require this at this very moment while I am here with you. I felt a chill go up my spine once more. The automobile breaking down was a blessing in disguise, D'Angelo murmured with a knowing grin. My gaze fell upon him. It was true what he said. He would not be present if the vehicle had not experienced a breakdown. It would not have transpired on this night or at this moment. In your opinion, was this merely a coincidence? I inquired. He stared straight into my eyes. Hey Laura, I'm not sure. What I do know is that I want this outcome. A comforting feeling washed over me. No longer did it matter if it had been a coincidence or not. Thanks to D'Angelo, I experienced a surge of energy I hadn't felt in a long time. Going into the night, I resented it. I preferred it if Caleb stayed away. Additionally, I am eager to share with you how much further this progressed. Keep watching because there's more to come in this story. I can tell this story has really irritated you because you've come this far. More information is available. Make sure you don't miss it. Please consider subscribing, enabling notifications, and leaving a comment.